morning rain tapped gently against the windows of Meridian Financial as David Chen adjusted his daughter's pink coat. One more time, Sophie clutched her favorite doll, and her wide blue eyes studied the tall glass building before them. David knelt, whispering that today was important and she would need to be quiet and patient. Sophie nodded with the solemn air of a child who understood more than she could express, though her curls bounced lightly like when they went to the library. David smiled, but inside his stomach was tight with worry. This was not how he planned the day his babysitter had canceled, leaving him no choice but to bring Sophie to the interview. The elevator to the 28th floor felt endless. David had worked in finance for years before everything collapsed 6 months earlier. His divorce had finalized at the same moment his company announced layoffs. Now he was both a single father and unemployed, fighting to keep up with bills and still searching for stability. When he stepped into the reception area full of polished candidates, whispers immediately followed him. The sight of a man with a child at a high-stakes interview was enough to draw disapproving stares and judgmental comments. The receptionist, stern and unwelcoming, told him children were not permitted but reluctantly directed him to wait. Sophie sat quietly, swinging her legs, whispering to her doll, while David tried to ignore the weight of critical eyes around them. Hours dragged by. Candidates muttered cruel remarks, doubting his professionalism and predicting his failure. Sophie grew restless, but David shared his granola bar and let her draw on the back of his resume, keeping her occupied. At last his name was called, and he entered a bright conference room where Catherine Meridian, the CEO herself, waited. She greeted him with warmth that shifted to surprise upon seeing Sophie. David quickly apologized, explaining the failed childcare. But before he could finish, Catherine crouched, slightly addressing Sophie, directly asking her name and admiring her doll. She welcomed both father and daughter with such ease that David felt the tightness in his chest begin to loosen. She brought a small chair and crayons from her drawer, explaining that she too had raised a daughter and understood what it meant to balance both worlds. Sophie settled happily, coloring while her father sat across from the CEO. The interview that followed was unlike any David had known. Catherine asked thoughtful questions, listening carefully to every answer, respecting his insights and acknowledging his challenges. When Sophie whispered for help with a crayon, or proudly showed her butterfly, Catherine paused naturally, giving the child genuine attention. She spoke gently about butterflies and changed words that touched David deeply, reminding him that beauty often follows hardship at the end. She asked what gave him the courage to attend. Despite obstacles, David answered with honesty, explaining how his life had unraveled and yet how he had learned to adapt, to value resilience and never give up on what truly mattered. Sophie added softly that Daddy worked hard and read her stories and that they were a team. Catherine smiled and told David that what she had seen was not unprofessional but proof of strength and character. That evening, as David tucked Sophie into bed, the phone rang. It was Catherine, offering him the position with fair pay, benefits, and family flexibility, including on-site childcare. David was overwhelmed, but she reassured him, saying she too had once been in his place and had learned that true value came from people who faced challenges with grace. She wanted him on her team months later. David thrived at Meridian, his skills opening doors for new clients. But what mattered more was the culture of support. Sophie was welcomed in moments of need. Her father encouraged to attend her school play or stay home when she was unwell. Catherine lived her promise that a company should honor the whole person, not just the professional image. One afternoon, Sophie bounded into David's office saying Miss Catherine wanted to see them together. They found her with a gift for Sophie, a doll in a sharp business suit named Hope, a reminder that girls could grow to be anything they dreamed. Sophie hugged the doll while Catherine explained that the day David brought his daughter to the interview had reminded her of her own journey and why she built the company not just for success but for people to thrive without sacrificing what they loved. Years later, Catherine would retell this story. When asked about her leadership philosophy, she would explain that life's complications often reveal the deepest strengths, and that kindness can shape workplaces in ways strategy never could. David too shared his side of the story, telling other parents about the day he discovered that the right opportunity would not just tolerate his circumstances, but embrace them. Sophie, grown into a lawyer, kept both dolls on her desk. The worn doll Emma beside the business-suited Hope. They reminded her daily that success was not only about climbing high, but about lifting others along the way. The simple act of Catherine, pulling up an extra chair instead of sending them away, had rippled across years, shaping lives and perspectives. True leaders understand that strength is not found in flawless perfection, but in recognizing that humanity and compassion make the strongest foundations of all.